Could one Ayuso strike a blow against Jonas Vingegaard before the mountains have even come? Paris is it's a tricky race. Crosswinds, wind, time trials, how good your team is, hectic stages. That's even before you get to the climbs later in the race. And stage 3 presented the riders with a very important team time trial, 23.5 kilometers long, not as difficult as previous years. One for the bigger riders. There was a hill last year near the finish. Visma Lease Bike were actually the favourites for the stage, as you can see them warming up with their GC leader Jonas Vingegaard. They got French time trial natty champ Bruno Amaury on the team. UAE set off, they got McNulty as their GC leader and former time trial national champions. They're looking good at the intermediate, especially as Jayco are typically a good TTT team, but they dropped a few too many riders too quickly, having only 2 riders for the last 5 minutes or so, with McNulty just beating FDJ. With Visma, they had Affini, Campenaerts, Armorel, Vingegaard's a good TT rider. And we look at the order. I'll go through with the other teams as well. Piganzoli's at the back on Vingegaard's wheel. In front of him is Armorel. And then at the front, you can see it's Campenaerts getting them up to speed, followed by Zangler, then Affini and Kelderman. So probably the worst spots to sit would be behind Campenaerts, who's a bit like Remco, and probably behind Vingegaard for Piganzoli. And we were seeing what would the intermediate time check look like, and in fact, it looked pretty good. If you considering UAE Emirates have been very good in this discipline, they weren't actually at Paris last year, so maybe 4 seconds, 3.5 seconds, that's not going to get the job done. But Visma seemed to speed up the back half of the TT. They were much faster, setting a time under 27 minutes, going 26:56, about 21.5 seconds quicker than UAE Team Emirates, and with Piganzoli and Vingegaard finishing on the same time with Armirail. Other teams adopted slightly different strategies. Movistar launched Romeo, who's their best TT rider, obviously, but they were a bit short. Decathlon, talk about good and bad sits. Nicolas Prudhomme is their GC leader here in Paris, the breakout rider of last year. He's behind Dan Holer, who's quite a bit taller than him. So in theory, he's got a good sit there. That's why they've put him there in the first place. And at T1, they were looking good. 7 seconds ahead of Visma, still a full complement of riders. But then at 17 minutes with 10 minutes left, every 30 seconds, they lose a rider. Bang, bang, bang. They start to shed riders. And most importantly, Nicolas Prudhomme's shoulders are rocking and rolling. And so on the last hill, with about 5 minutes left, when Dan Holer sets off, that's all she wrote. And we're thinking, well, Decathlon have collapsed. Until they go to the finish, Dan Holer has done the last 5 minutes alone or more, and still holds on to beat Visma Lease Bike. Prudhomme loses a minute though, so if they don't win the stage, it would still be all for naught, and then he should have waited in theory. Lidl-Trek, they were second favourites, and they have a team with no weakness here. They've got Swedish natty champ Söderqvist, Skoins, who's natty champ of Latvia, Søren Krasgood, Kemner's a good time trial rider, Ayuso himself is a powerful time trial rider, as well as Vacek. So no weaknesses. Their lineup was Söderqvist, then Vacek, then Ayuso. I can't see behind them, but Ayuso was to follow Vacek throughout the TTT, and they looked smooth the whole time. It was in a line, never thrashing about, no overlapping of wheels, just looked smooth, fast. They kept riders together seemingly for the appropriate amounts of time. They used the 2 big engines, Söderqvist and Vacek, to launch Ayuso. You'll see at the right time. Ayuso he was at the back on the hill, not pulling through. Maybe that's because they did dead pulls with Bernard and Kemner and then left the big boys here. Söderqvist launch, Vacek launch code number 2, and Ayuso is off to the races with a big, big time. 26 minutes, 42.5 for Lidl-Trek, beating Decathlon, putting 15 seconds, 17 seconds into Visma. Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, they were lined up with a good TTT team. Danny Martinez and Vlasov was their leaders, but they did a respectable performance, but not enough to trouble the top 3 steps. But still look out for Martinez and Vlasov this week. But Ineos Grenadiers, they had maybe the most complicated TTT to execute, because they've got trucks in Vauquelin, Tarling, Godon, Kwiatkowski's very experienced, Watson. But then Rodriguez is not in good shape, crashing, is not good in the TT, a flat one. And then Onley is maybe improving, but not a natural in a flat TT either. He's a lot lighter. So when you look at their order, they actually start with Godon, then Tarling, then Watson, then Vauquelin, Onley, Kwiatkowski, Rodriguez. And Rodriguez is off the back in the first corner. Now, he was sweeper, and he was dropped early, but sweeper's not an easy role. Vauquelin nearly, maybe co-leadership beef, nearly gets chopped by Oscar Onley, and Geraint Thomas in the car going, whoa, what are you doing, lads? And what they're doing was a very fast time to the intermediate time check. They were smoking this TT Ineos Grenadiers. 13 seconds, 55 kph at T1. Still had 5 riders. Most importantly, they had a Josh Tarling, obviously on a magnificent day. Only pulls a bit on the descent, then Vauquelin. It's those 3, so Tarling with their 2 GC leaders. But problems begin here. Tarling's in the extensions. Only gets out. He hits this speed bump. It just takes him for a ride at speed. He loses a bit of momentum, loses just a gap to the wheel to Tarling, struggles to get back in the extensions quickly, and then he starts to drop the wheel. And he's putting Vauquelin on a gap, but Tarling looks back. He sees Onley basically back on the wheel at this moment, but he just got back on the wheel. And then when Tarling puts the gas on again, he gets dropped into this little kicker. Vauquelin has to close the gap, and obviously the idea is to slingshot the 2 GC guys, and he does slingshot out of Tarling's draft. Onley doesn't really lose that much time, considering the gap he was about to be on with 1K to go. And the Ineos Grenadiers bring home what is an upset victory. They were not the favourites or second favourites, beating Lidl-Trek by the best part of 3 seconds. Decathlon, or maybe we should call them Darnhola, on 11 seconds. Visma on 15, Red Bull 20, EF 23, Movistar 28. Tight gaps. Here's what Vauquelin had to say after the stage.
Just a word in English, because you speak perfect English now that you're at Ineos. A word on this victory, this first victory on Paris-Nice with the team. What an effort it was.
Yeah, it's a really big win with the team, because the team improved a lot in the TT and work a lot with the in the winter, and you can see yesterday in Tirreno and in Algarve, and now in Paris-Nice. It's very proud of us, and it's really good.
To pass the line on your own like that, that was planned?
Yeah. The plan is go too fast, and now in the finish, I know I'm really good in the end of 3 kilometers, and now I push full gas for take the second, and I think it's good because you have just 2 seconds front of Lidl.
In terms of GC, Juan Ayuso, because of the Lidl-Trek TTT, goes into the yellow jersey and his bonus seconds yesterday in the sprint. 2 seconds ahead of Vauquelin, 3 seconds ahead of Onley. Piganzoli and Vingegaard on 17, Vlasov, Martinez 22 seconds. Tight gaps, but Paris-Nice is often decided by tight gaps. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you the recap tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.